You may think you know Forrest Gump. He ran across America, met presidents, and taught the world that life is like a box of chocolates. That part is clear. But what most people don't realize is that many of the moments that feel effortless on screen were the result of unusual decisions, quiet compromises, and real consequences behind the camera. The film involved real shrimp business details, strange casting choices, and a series of accidents that could have gone very wrong. Instead, they shaped the movie in ways no one expected, sometimes helping it, and sometimes costing people more than the audience ever knew. Forrest Gump looks simple, but the story behind how it was made is not. Stay with us as we reveal 20 weird facts about Forrest Gump that you probably didn't know. Number 1. The lip that nearly ended a career. Mykelti Williamson's portrayal of Bubba is one of the most memorable parts of Forrest Gump. His wide eyes, gentle voice, and large lower lip made the character instantly recognizable. What many people didn't realize was that the lip was not real. Williamson wore a prosthetic lip to create Bubba's distinctive look. While the performance earned praise from audiences, it created an unexpected problem afterward. Casting directors began to associate the actor entirely with Bubba's appearance. Despite having acted in numerous television shows before Forrest Gump, Williamson struggled to find new roles. Many people in the industry did not recognize him without the prosthetic and assumed Bubba's look was natural. Things changed when Williamson appeared on The Late Show with David Letterman. Viewers finally saw what he looked like in real life. After that appearance, casting offers began to return. The role that made him famous almost ended his career, proving how a single visual choice can have lasting consequences. Number 2. A lasting partnership. Forrest Gump marked the first time Tom Hanks and Gary Sinise appeared together on screen. Their portrayal of Forrest and Lieutenant Dan created one of the film's strongest emotional relationships, built on friendship, loss, and loyalty. That connection did not end with this movie. The two actors went on to work together again in Apollo 13, where Hanks played astronaut Jim Lovell and Sinise portrayed Ken Mattingly. The film was praised for its realism, tension, and teamwork under pressure. They later appeared together once more in The Green Mile. Although Sinise had a smaller role, the pattern was clear. Every film they shared was well received and nominated for Best Picture at the Academy Awards. Only Forrest Gump won, but all three became lasting classics. Their repeated collaborations showed how strong on-screen chemistry can carry across different stories. When Hanks and Sinise worked together, the emotional weight felt genuine, not forced. That bond became part of Forrest Gump's legacy beyond a single film. Number 3. Prop or real. In Forrest Gump, Lieutenant Dan wears a rosary with a Street Christopher medal during the Vietnam scenes. At first glance, it looks like a simple costume detail. In reality, it carried deep personal meaning. The rosary belonged to Gary Sinise's brother-in-law, Jack Treese, who served in Vietnam during the late 1960s. He wore that same rosary during combat. When Sinise was cast as Lieutenant Dan, he asked permission to use it in the film as a tribute. Jack agreed, allowing a real object from a real war to appear on screen. This choice added authenticity to the performance and honored the experiences of those who had served. For Gary Sinise, the rosary was not just a prop, it was a symbol of respect. It connected the fictional story of Lieutenant Dan to the real lives of veterans, grounding the film's war scenes in genuine history. Number 4. A studio's choice. Robert Zemeckis is widely praised for directing Forrest Gump, but he was not the studio's first choice. Before Zemeckis became involved, Paramount Pictures considered several other directors for the project. The first offer went to Terry Gilliam, known for his imaginative and unconventional style. Gilliam passed on the film, feeling it was not the right fit for him. The studio then approached Barry Sonnenfeld, who initially agreed to direct and began early development. However, Sonnenfeld left the project when he was offered the chance to direct Addams Family Values. That decision opened the door for Robert Zemeckis, who had already proven his ability to balance emotion and spectacle in films like Back to the Future. Zemeckis ultimately brought a careful blend of visual innovation and emotional restraint to the film. His direction shaped the tone that audiences remember today. What began as a backup choice ended up being exactly what the movie needed. Number 5. The voice of Forrest. One of the most recognizable elements of Forrest Gump is the way Forrest speaks. His slow, gentle Southern accent became inseparable from the character. Interestingly, this voice was not part of Tom Hanks's original plan. At first, Hanks intended to use a softer and more neutral accent. That changed when a young actor named Michael Connor Humphreys was cast as the child version of Forrest. Humphreys was from Mississippi and spoke with a natural Southern accent that was not acted or exaggerated. After hearing the boy speak, Tom Hanks made a key decision. Instead of asking the child actor to adjust his voice, Hanks chose to copy it. He carefully studied the rhythm, tone, and pronunciation and adapted his performance to match. This choice helped create continuity across Forrest's life. As the character grew older, he still sounded like the same person. The decision added authenticity and reinforced the feeling that Forrest's identity remained intact from childhood to adulthood. Number 6. The hit that lost money. Forrest Gump was one of the highest-grossing films of the 1990s, earning more than $350 million worldwide. To audiences, it looked like a massive financial success. Behind the scenes, however, the story was far more complicated. Paramount Pictures later claimed that the film had actually lost money, reporting a deficit of over $60 million. The studio attributed the loss to high marketing costs and fees paid to theaters. This situation is often explained by a practice known as Hollywood accounting. Through complex financial reporting, studios can make profitable films appear unprofitable on paper. As a result, people who were promised a share of the profits may receive nothing. One of those affected was author Winston Groom, whose book inspired the film. Despite the movie's success, he did not receive the earnings he expected. The case became a classic example of how success in Hollywood does not always translate into fair compensation. Number 7. Bubba could have been someone else. Bubba became one of the most memorable characters in Forrest Gump, largely because of his endless passion for shrimp. However, several well-known actors were considered for the role before it was finally cast. David Alan Grier, Ice Cube, and Dave Chappelle all turned down the part. Ice Cube felt the character was portrayed as slow or foolish and did not want to take on that image. Dave Chappelle also declined, believing the movie would not be successful. He later admitted that turning it down was one of the biggest mistakes of his career. Even Tupac Shakur auditioned for the role, and footage of his reading still exists. Despite the interest from these high-profile names, the role ultimately went to Mykelti Williamson. Williamson brought warmth, sincerity, and emotional depth to Bubba. While others passed on the opportunity, his performance became one of the film's most enduring elements, showing how the right casting choice can elevate a supporting role into something unforgettable. Number 8. The ping pong skills. One of the more surprising moments in Forrest Gump is when Forrest becomes a champion table tennis player. After being injured in the war, he is given a paddle and told to keep his eye on the ball. Forrest takes that advice literally. Throughout every ping pong scene in the movie, Forrest never blinks. This was a deliberate acting choice made by Tom Hanks. He wanted to show Forrest's total focus and his straightforward way of following instructions. Although the ball was added later using visual effects, the movement and timing had to be precise. To achieve this, the filmmakers hired a professional table tennis player to train the actors. The training ensured that Forrest's body movements looked natural and believable. The result was a sequence that felt effortless and impressive. It showed how Forrest's simple approach often led him to unexpected success, reinforcing one of the film's recurring themes. Number 9. The Indian remake. Forrest Gump resonated far beyond the United States. Its themes of kindness, perseverance, and simple wisdom connected with audiences around the world. Because of that, the story was eventually adapted for a different culture. In India, a full remake was developed for local audiences. The project was led by Amir Khan, one of the country's most well-known actors and producers. The film reimagined Forrest's journey using Indian history and cultural events instead of American ones. The remake, titled Lal Singh Chaddha, faced a long and difficult production process. Delays caused by the COVID-19 pandemic slowed filming and created uncertainty about whether the movie would ever be completed. When it was finally released in 2022, the film introduced the core message of Forrest Gump to a new generation. It demonstrated how the story's emotional foundation could travel across cultures while still remaining recognizable at its heart. Number 10. Real shrimpers. One of the most beloved parts of Forrest Gump is the shrimping business. Forrest starts after the war. What begins as a promise to Lieutenant Dan turns into a new purpose for both of them. Those shrimping scenes were not filmed on a studio set. They were shot on the real Gulf of Mexico. Even more surprising, many of the people seen working in the background were not actors. They were real shrimpers who knew how to handle the boats, the nets, and the daily routines of the job. This realism gave the scenes a natural feeling that could not have been easily staged. The work looked authentic because it was authentic. The filmmakers also drew inspiration from a real-life Vietnam veteran who returned home and started a shrimping business as a way to rebuild his life. By grounding this part of the story in real people and real work, the film added an extra layer of honesty. It showed healing not as a dramatic moment, but as something built slowly through effort and routine. Number 11. The Blue Plaid Shirt. Forrest Gump covers many different periods of Forrest's life, from childhood to adulthood. Even as time moves forward and everything around him changes, there is one small detail that quietly stays the same. Every time Forrest enters a new phase of his life, he is wearing a blue plaid shirt. This happens more than once throughout the movie. When Forrest appears as a young boy, a teenager, and later as an adult in new chapters of his life, the same shirt pattern appears again. This was a deliberate choice by the filmmakers. The blue plaid shirt acts as a visual anchor. It signals to the audience that time has passed, but Forrest himself has not changed on the inside. While the world moves forward and becomes more complicated, Forrest remains consistent in who he is. This simple wardrobe choice helped maintain emotional continuity across decades of storytelling. It's a subtle reminder that even when life changes rapidly, a person's core can remain the same. Number 12. The helicopters were real. Although Forrest Gump is often remembered as a gentle and emotional film, the war scenes were treated with serious attention to detail. One of the most important choices involved the helicopters used during the Vietnam sequences. Instead of using replicas or simplified models, the filmmakers used real helicopters of the same type flown during the Vietnam War. These were not modern stand-ins. They matched the original aircraft in sound, movement, and appearance. Using real helicopters helped ground the scenes in authenticity. When soldiers were dropped into the jungle or when aircraft flew low over the trees, the moments felt genuine because they were built on real machines and real history. This decision reflected the filmmakers' respect for the subject matter. Even though the war was only one part of the story, it was handled with care. The realism was not meant to impress, it was meant to honor the experience of those who lived through it. Number 13. Vietnam was actually South Carolina. Some of the most intense scenes in Forrest Gump take place during the Vietnam War. The jungle, the rain, and the chaos felt so authentic that many viewers assumed the film was shot overseas. In reality, those Vietnam scenes were filmed in South Carolina. The production used Fripp Island, near the coast, because its landscape closely matched what they needed. Much of the filming took place on land that later became part of the Ocean Creek Golf Course. One challenge remained. South Carolina does not have the towering mountains seen in Vietnam. To fix this, the filmmakers added the mountains later during post-production, using computer-generated imagery. The effect was subtle enough that most viewers never noticed. By combining a carefully chosen location with discrete visual effects, the filmmakers turned a quiet coastal area into a convincing war zone. It was another example of how realism in the film often came from smart planning rather than expensive spectacle. Number 14. The Famous Bench. One of the most iconic moments in Forrest Gump takes place on a simple park bench. This is where Forrest tells his life story while holding a box of chocolates and sharing his most famous line. The bench became one of the most recognizable images in movie history. What many people don't know is that the bench was never part of the park. The scenes were filmed in Chippewa Square in Savannah, Georgia, a real public square. However, the real benches in the park all faced inward toward the center, not toward the street. That layout did not work for filming. To solve the problem, the crew built a bench specifically for the movie and placed it near the sidewalk so the camera could capture people, cars, and city life in the background. The bench was designed to blend in perfectly with the real ones, making the change invisible to viewers. After filming was completed, the bench was removed and given to the Savannah History Museum. Today, fans from around the world visit the museum to see it. The bench may not have existed before the movie, but it has since become a permanent piece of film history. Number 15. Forrest's mom was almost his age. Sally Field delivered one of the most memorable performances in the film as Forrest's mother. She was strong, protective, and deeply loving. Her message that Forrest was no different from anyone else became one of the emotional foundations of the movie. What many viewers don't realize is how small the real-life age gap was between Sally Field and Tom Hanks. She was only about 10 years older than him. In fact, just 6 years before Forrest Gump, the two actors appeared together in another film, Punchline, where they played romantic partners. The shift from lovers to mother and son might sound unbelievable, but the transformation worked so well that most audiences never questioned it. Makeup, wardrobe, and performance created the illusion of a much wider age gap. This casting choice demonstrates the power of acting and presentation. It also reinforces one of the film's central ideas. What matters is not how things look at first glance, but how convincingly they are lived. Sally Field didn't just play a mother, she made the role feel real, regardless of numbers on a calendar. Number 16. The sequel that never happened. Given the enormous success of Forrest Gump, many people assumed a sequel was inevitable. In fact, a sequel was seriously planned. Winston Groom, the author of the original novel, wrote a follow-up book titled Gump and Co., which continued Forrest's story into later years. The sequel discussions were complicated from the beginning. Groom had been promised a share of the film's profits, but later claimed the studio did not honor that agreement. Because of this, the sequel also became a way to resolve unfinished business behind the scenes. By 2001, a script had been completed, and the project appeared to be moving forward. Then history intervened. After the September 11 attacks, both Tom Hanks and director Robert Zemeckis revisited the script. They felt the tone no longer fit the world they were living in. Jokes and moments that once felt harmless suddenly seemed inappropriate. They made the decision not to proceed. The sequel was never officially canceled, but it was quietly abandoned. Since then, it has remained in what the industry calls development hell. The decision not to continue, the story shows how closely this film was tied to its time. Some stories belong to a specific moment, and forcing them forward can break what made them special in the first place. Number 17. Forrest Gump Pictures. There is a small detail in Forrest Gump that most viewers never notice, even after multiple viewings. Every time a still photograph of Forrest appears in the movie, his eyes are closed. This happens in every single photo shown on screen. It was not an accident or a coincidence. It was done intentionally. The idea came from both the director and Tom Hanks. They treated it as a quiet visual joke that fit perfectly with Forrest's personality. Forrest is not someone who worries about posing, timing, or appearances. He lives in the moment, so when a picture is taken, he just happens to blink. These photographs appear throughout the film. Forrest is shown as a football player, a soldier, and even at the White House. In every image, his eyes are shut. The detail is subtle, but once noticed, it adds a layer of charm and consistency to the character. More importantly, the closed eyes reinforce the idea that Forrest never tries to control how the world sees him. He does not perform for cameras or history. He simply lives his life. That tiny decision helped make the character feel more honest and human, even in moments frozen in time. Number 18. The Brothers Switch. One of the most iconic parts of Forrest Gump is the sequence where Forrest runs across America. He runs through deserts, along highways, over bridges, and into small towns. These scenes became symbols of determination and endurance. What most viewers never realized is that in many of those wide shots, it was not Tom Hanks running at all. Instead, the runner was his younger brother, Jim Hanks. From a distance, the two look remarkably similar. When the production needed long shots of Forrest running far from the camera, Jim stepped in. This allowed filming to move faster and saved Tom Hanks from exhausting days of repeated running while he was already busy with close-up scenes. Jim Hanks did more than simply run. He carefully studied Tom's posture, stride, and movement so that everything would match perfectly. This attention to detail made the switch invisible to audiences. Most viewers never noticed the difference, which is exactly what the filmmakers wanted. This quiet teamwork between two brothers highlights how much effort went into making the movie feel effortless. The running scenes look simple, but they were the result of planning, cooperation, and trust behind the camera. It's another example of how Forrest Gump achieved realism not through spectacle, but through thoughtful, unseen choices. Number 19. Tom Hanks was not the first choice. Today, it is almost impossible to imagine anyone other than Tom Hanks as Forrest Gump. His performance felt natural, gentle, and unforgettable. However, Tom Hanks was not the first actor chosen for the role. In fact, he only joined the project after reading the script for about an hour and a half. After that short time, he called the filmmakers back and said yes, a decision that would change his career forever. Before Hanks committed, the role had already been offered to other major stars. John Travolta was the first choice. He turned it down and instead chose to star in Pulp Fiction. While that film became a massive success, Travolta later admitted that passing on Forrest Gump was a mistake. He said that Tom Hanks was ultimately perfect for the role, but the regret remained. Travolta was not the only actor considered. Bill Murray, Chevy Chase, and Sean Penn were also discussed at different stages. Each actor brought a very different energy, and none of them fully convinced the filmmakers. Some declined, others hesitated, and some simply did not feel right for the character. What makes this casting story important is not just who said no, but how close the film came to becoming something entirely different. Tom Hanks brought a rare mix of innocence, emotional depth, and restraint. His performance shaped how audiences connected to Forrest. Without that final casting decision, the movie's tone and its emotional impact could have been completely different. Number 20. The book was not the same. Many fans of Forrest Gump are surprised to learn that the movie was based on a book. The original novel, written by Winston Groom, was published in 1986, several years before the film was made. While the book shared the same title and followed the same general storyline, the version of Forrest on the page was very different from the one audiences came to love on screen. In the novel, Forrest was rougher, louder, and far less gentle. He could be rude, stubborn, and even aggressive at times. Although he still had a good heart, his personality was much stronger and less innocent. Winston Groom once explained that when he imagined Forrest, he pictured someone physically larger and more imposing. In an interview with the New York Times, Groom said he had imagined John Goodman in the role, which gives a clear idea of how different his vision was. When the film adaptation began, the writers and director made a deliberate decision to change Forrest's personality. They softened him, quieted him down, and made him more polite and emotionally accessible. These changes were not accidental. They were designed to make the character more relatable and to allow the emotional moments of the story to resonate with a wider audience. Groom later said that the film had sanded down Forrest's rough edges. What this change ultimately did was redefine the entire tone of the story. The movie version of Forrest Gump became less about satire and exaggeration and more about warmth, empathy, and emotional connection. While the book and the film told the same basic story, the film's gentler version of Forrest is what allowed the movie to become a global phenomenon. It showed how a single creative decision can completely reshape how a story is remembered. Forrest Gump is often remembered as a gentle, feel-good film about kindness and fate. But behind that simplicity lies a complex web of creative risks, personal sacrifices, and unseen decisions. From casting choices that reshaped careers to real objects pulled from history, the movie was built on details the audience was never meant to notice. Some choices led to success, others came with quiet costs. The film's lasting power comes not just from what appears on screen, but from everything that happened behind it. Forrest Gump reminds us that even the simplest stories can have the most complicated truths hiding underneath. If you thought you knew everything about this movie, now you know there was much more than what met the eye.